श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवान ની જય, અક્ષર પુરુષોત્તમ મહારાજની જય, પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજની જય, મહંત સ્વામી મહારાજની જય, પ્રમુખ સ્વામી મહારાજ શતાબ્દી મહોત્સવની જય. In the last session, we looked at how Sriji Maharaj appointed Narayanda, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, as the Pramukh, as the president of the Sanstha. And throughout this episode that we've been looking at over the last 2 weeks, we have seen the relationship between the Shishya and the Guru. We can see Pramukh Swami Maharaj's Guru Bhakti and how Shastriji Maharaj, his affection towards Pramukh Swami Maharaj's Samarpan, his Bhakti, his Nishtha. These are some of the things that we witnessed over the last 2 weeks. Last session we discussed how Pramukh Swami Maharaj was appointed as the Pramukh of the Sanstha, and then we ended with the last session where some Hari Bhakt had actually come up to, Shankar Bhai had come up to, Ishwar Bhai Daji had come up to Shastriji Maharaj requesting him to sign a document regarding a particular land deal, and then Shastriji Maharaj said to him that, look, I've handed over everything to Narayanda, so I'm not going to sign anything else anymore. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj was then called in from Sarangpur to Ahmedabad for 1 day to sign that document. And then from there on, Pramukh Swami Maharaj went to Bochasan, Petlad, and then came back to Ahmedabad. As we continue, we're looking at C45, page 147. Now, Shastriji Maharaj, due to his age, his health wasn't too well either, and Shastriji Maharaj was resting in Ahmedabad. And earlier the year before, in the year 1949, the Sanstha had purchased a bungalow on Shahibag Road. And it was a very fitting location for the mandir. Today, it is in the same location where we have our mandir today. But that was a bungalow that Shastriji Maharaj and the Sanstha had acquired at that time. Now in 1950, when Shastriji Maharaj wasn't too well, Shastriji Maharaj was resting at this bungalow. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj was also with Shastriji Maharaj at that time. Now, seeing Shastriji Maharaj's condition, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was a little distressed, and immediately he got involved in all sorts of seva and looking after Shastriji Maharaj. On June 19th, 1950, Shastriji Maharaj was in Ahmedabad at that time, and Sanatan Swami was asked to recite the Uddhav Gita. Shastriji Maharaj was very pleased with this, and then when he saw Pramukh Swami, he requested to Pramukh Swami Maharaj saying, your voice, your rag, your voice is also very, very good. Therefore, read the Nishkudanand Kavya, because it inspires one to acquire vairagya and love towards God. In Maharaj's time, when the sadhus used to go for vichran, Maharaj would say to them that your conduct will speak for itself. One should constantly keep the company of great sadhus. Why constantly? Because as every action of his is worth knowing about. And after giving this advice to Swami Shri, Shastriji Maharaj then narrated an incident that took place in Gondal, where Bhagwanji Bhai of Manasa had the darshan of Sriji Maharaj in Shastriji Maharaj's own form. So it was at this time that Shastriji Maharaj then requested Pramukh Swami Maharaj to recite a parayan on the 2nd and the 3rd chapters of the Satsang Jivan. This was the first time that Pramukh Swami Maharaj recited this parayan in front of Shastriji Maharaj. So there was another historic moment. And for Shastriji Maharaj, as we've known from earlier episodes as well, just listening to Narayanda recite discourses from the scriptures was medicine itself. It was healing, it was very therapeutic. And this, you could see Shastriji Maharaj's health improve as this would happen. Let's move on to C46. Now, this is another incident where when Shastriji Maharaj was ill, again in 1950, this is just 2 days later, Yogiji Maharaj was at that time traveling and doing vichran in Delhi, and he had returned from Delhi to Ahmedabad. That time, Shastriji Maharaj instructed to Yogiji Maharaj, saying, now Maharaj will call us to Dham. Therefore, I'm handing over the responsibility of this Narayanda to you. Look after him. He's entrusting Pramukh Swami Maharaj to Yogiji Maharaj and saying that, look after him now. And hearing these words of Shastriji Maharaj, Swami was a little bit distraught because this was not what he expected. because he had just become the Pramukh of the Sanstha. There were so many other responsibilities with him, upon him. And so very humbly, he prayed in front of Shastriji Maharaj saying, Bapa, the work in Gadara is still outstanding, so please get rid of this illness. It's very interesting how Pramukh Swami Maharaj addresses Shastriji Maharaj as Bapa. Bapa, the work in Gadara is still outstanding, so please get rid of your illness. And Shastriji Maharaj responded saying, now it's like Labdaya Namaha. That means it's not, I don't think we can recover from this. And then he said, whatever is Maharaj's wish will happen. Again, we can see this in Shastriji Maharaj's tone all the time. Everything happens at the will of God. When we look at the life of Pramukh Swami Maharaj, we can see that Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often quote this, ke Jevi Bhagwanni Ichha. And we can see that these are the learnings from his guru, Shastriji Maharaj, that he has learned and imbibed throughout his entire life, and he carried this with him. When Shastriji Maharaj said that, so then Pramukh Swami Maharaj's anxiety increased. He became a little more worried, and with a very heavy heart, he had to leave obviously for Saharanpur because there was a lot more work to do. And just seeing Shastriji Maharaj in this condition, he didn't want to leave to go to Saharanpur. But obviously there was a lot of work he had been entrusted in Shastriji Maharaj's wish. And so he went to Saharanpur. From Saharanpur, he went to Gadara. Now, Pramukh Swami Maharaj then spent some time in Gadara for about 1.5 months, just overlooking the work and the construction of the mandir, because he was only 1 year away before the Pratishta. And so he spent some time in Gadara, and eventually he went to meet Shastriji Maharaj in Atladra. In Atladra, on the 11th of September 1950, this is the day when Pramukh Swami Maharaj went to Atladra, and he met Shastriji Maharaj. Shastriji Maharaj was so happy to see him. He got up and embraced him with immense pleasure. And as soon as he arrived, Shastriji Maharaj told Pramukh Swami Maharaj, I want you to read the Parayan from the Hari Lilamrit. So again, we can see the Guru Shishya connection over here. Shastriji Maharaj waiting to meet Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And we noticed how earlier in the letter, he also mentioned how he would be longing to meet Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And so when Pramukh Swami Maharaj comes over, Shastriji Maharaj requests him to read from the Hari Lilamrit. Swamiji would sing from the scripture, and Swami's voice was also very pleasant. Shastriji Maharaj would listen to this while he was lying down. And just listening again to Pramukh Swami Maharaj's voice would bring a lot of improvement to Shastriji Maharaj's health. What an incredible way to please your Guru and serve your Guru in this way. After the Parayan was over, Yogiji Maharaj was supposed to go to Gondal, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj was supposed to go to Sarangpur. But Yogiji Maharaj had a wish to visit Vartal, to go and do darshan over there before he went to Gondal. So Shastriji Maharaj, he gave him permission, and then Shastriji Maharaj instructed Pramukh Swami Maharaj that why don't you also accompany Yogi Maharaj to Vartal for darshan, and then you can make your way to Sarangpur. So this is also something that Pramukh Swami Maharaj noted in his diaries. Let's move on to C47. This is a very interesting prasang, a very interesting story about how Pramukh Swami Maharaj narrates a particular dream that he had. It's not very common to hear such prasangs from Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Nevertheless, there were a few incidences in Swamishi's life, and when we look at the Jivan Charitra as we move on, there are a few episodes where we hear about Pramukh Swami Maharaj's dreams. Yogiji Maharaj often used to talk about it. We hear Puja Mahan Swami Maharaj also talk about it. Pramukh Swami Maharaj seldom talked about any of his dreams, but a few of the dreams we have been accounted for in this in the Jivan Charitra. So Pramukh Swami Maharaj was now in Sarangpur, and obviously at the back of his mind he's worried about Shastriji Maharaj's health, not to mention all the other responsibilities of the presidency, the construction of the mandir, and all the other projects. This was all looming behind in the back of his mind. And because of this, Swamiji would be very uneasy sometimes. And, he'd often think, okay, Shastriji Maharaj has given me all these responsibilities, yet his health keeps on remaining weak. And how will I be able to carry on this seva? And with these thoughts in mind, one night, Swami went to sleep and he had a dream. And I'm going to describe the dream now. So in the dream, Pramukh Swami Maharaj says that he was going for darshan in Sarangpur for the murtis of Dharmakur. So Dharmakur is the last shrine in the Sarangpur shrines that we have seen. So he went for darshan for the murtis of Dharmakur in Sarangpur. And as soon as he got there were no murtis to be seen. So he was very worried. Where's all the murtis gone? And then he goes to the first shrine, the first khand, where Hare Krishna Maharaj was. Again, he didn't see any murtis over there. So this was a bit of a shock to Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And he kept on wondering, where is everything gone? Why all the murtis disappeared? And in his mind, he's thinking, "Batasu kaise? What's going to happen if, all the murtis have gone?" Now, these are the murtis that Pramukh Swami Maharaj, during his entire tenure as a Kothari of Sarangpur Mandir, would regularly go there for darshan and do seva. And with these thoughts, he was very pained, he was very, very unhappy. And then, suddenly, in the first shrine, he saw a murti of Radha Krishna. And these two murtis were just getting up, as if they'd just woken up from sleep. And so he saw the two murtis emerging. And then very shortly, he saw the murti of Hari Krishna Maharaj. That also appeared. So seeing this, Swamiji was just wondering that how come there's two murtis of Radha Krishna and Bhagwan Swaminarayan, why is he all alone? Where is his sevak? And so immediately then he had darshan of Mulji Brahmachari. We know that the image of Mulji Brahmachari is also in the first shrine. So Mulji Brahmachari was doing seva of Sriji Maharaj. And then he asked Hari Krishna Maharaj that the murtis of Dharamkod are not visible. Where have they gone? And so then Sriji Maharaj says to Pramukh Swami Maharaj, "Go and have a look one more time. Now you will see darshan." So hearing this, Pramukh Swami Maharaj goes back to the shrine at the end of the Khand, and he sees the murtis of Dharamkod over there. All the murtis had risen and they had woken up and they could be seen in their respective places. And then it appeared as if every murti was looking at Swami Shri and smiling. Pramukh Swami Maharaj says that he became very emotional. This was all in a dream. And then with that, suddenly Shastriji Maharaj gives darshan again. And so seeing both Guru and Bhagwan together, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was very happy with this. And at that time, then Shastriji Maharaj spoke. And Shastriji Maharaj said to Swami Shri to perform the arti. And so according to Shastri Maharaj's Agna, Pramukh Swami Maharaj then performed the arti. And at this point, then Shastriji Maharaj said to Pramukh Swami Maharaj, "Don't think of the responsibilities. That is my job. Therefore, just remember Maharaj and Swami and carry out the work." And with these words, he placed his hands on Swami Shri's head and gave him the blessings. This was the strength and the energy that Pramukh Swami Maharaj was looking for. He had the blessings of his Guru, Shastriji Maharaj. Even in his dream, Shastriji Maharaj Swapnama Darshan Dida. So this was a very nice dream that Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often talk about. Let's move on to C48. While Pramukh Swami Maharaj was carrying on his seva as the president in the presidency, there was just 4 months into his presidency, a sadhu had written a letter to Pramukh Swami Maharaj. He was very extremely pleased by Swami Shri's proficiency, and he expressed his feelings in a letter. The letter that we're going to read now, just listen to the words and see the expressions that this sadhu, or the feelings that this sadhu has for Pramukh Swami Maharaj as the president. The letter is dated Wednesday, 27th September 1950. "I have been waiting a long time to write to you, but I felt it was not appropriate to write without a proper introduction. Also, sometimes you may not think it appropriate to write a letter without a proper introduction. Due to that fear, I did not write a letter. You are our senior. I have immense respect for you. You are the president of the Sanstha. You are a learned Shastri. You are calm, serious, and astute. You are just as cultured as you are well educated. Therefore, I was wondering what I could write to you. Your position as Pramukh is very eminent and unparalleled. You are holding an incredibly unique place in the satsang. You thoroughly deserve it. Not only this, but you also possess the power to further progress this satsang in the future. It is not unknown to anyone that you are contemplating and working day and night for the Sanstha. He's saying that this is all you think about, is how you can progress the work and the seva that you've been given. As he carries on writing, he says, the responsibilities and duties of the position you hold are also manifold. That you are fully aware of, and you're endowed with all virtues. Therefore, to carry out your duties, no obstacles will arise, even when the whole satsang community will be centered around you. Even then, the whole satsang community will be centered around you. The entire satsang, devotees and sadhus will all progress through the strength of your thoughts and abilities. your reputation will be enhanced and maintained. So, you are the pole star of all. My prayers to Sriji Swami and Guru Hari for them to bestow even more ability, strength, and divine powers on you. It's a very heartfelt letter written, very, very meaningful. The choice of words also are very powerful, but it also shows that the choice that was made by Shastriji Maharaj was perfect. Let us remind ourselves with the words that Shastriji Maharaj said, that in my entire life, I've never made a decision that I've ever had to regret. And again, in entrusting Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Shastri Narayan Swarup Das as the president of the Sanstha, again, I'm making a very selected decision that I will never regret again. But we also know that Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Shastri Maharaj also said, કે તમને 50 વર્ષનું સુખ આપતો જઉં. So I'm guaranteeing you 50 years of bliss. Let's move on to C49. So while Swami Shri was undertaking the work in Gadra, and we could see that as soon as Swami Shri took on the responsibilities, the work started to speed up. We could see the progress also very, very fast. And Swami would often, you could see a lot of talent in Swami's work. Swami Shri would often perform the inking of the plans of the mandir that were prepared by pencil for Sompura. So again, inking of the drawings. This is one thing Swami would do. For the marble that was to be used in the mandir in Gadra construction, Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often have to go to the quarries in Makrana, which is in Rajasthan. Very, very hot. Now this seva was very, very rigorous, and Swami faced a lot of difficulties at that time. And a glimpse of these difficulties could be seen in what Swami Shri once said to a young sevak who was left helpless at that time in Makrana. Pramukh Swami Maharaj had once gone to Makrana and the sevak had fallen ill. And at that time, the sevak was very, very distraught, very, very upset. But Pramukh Swami Maharaj spoke to him with lots of words of comfort and a lot of strength. And these are the words that Swami explained to the sevak at that time. And Swami Shri goes on to say, Shastriji Maharaj said to me one day, Narayan Swami, you have to go to Makrana for the work of Gadra. Pramukh Swami Maharaj goes on to say, I didn't ask, why do I need to go? What will I do when I go there? Where will I stay? Instead, the very next day, we departed from Ahmedabad and reached Fulera. From where we arrived in Makrana on a third day in the scorching heat. This was the first time that I had come to this region. We were very nervous. We knew nobody. But we left all our worries aside. We would just eat peanuts. That's all we had to eat. We would get a glass of water to drink. That's all we had to drink. We would have to be at work before the workers came on, and we would have to finish after they left. There were no thoughts of heat and sun. So we can see that Swami would have to get there before the laborers got there, and he had to leave the site only after the laborers had left. So the first person to get to the site and the last person to leave the site. This is in Makrana, untrodden territory, very, very hot, very hostile. Swami goes on to say that we had to go to the mines every day, the stone mines, turning stones, having to argue with the owners and the laborers. Even then, they would cheat us. Swami says that they had to be very careful not to get cheated because the stone that they were requiring for the mandir, and he mentions this in his talk. Swami carries on saying, we had to make sure that we were not deceived at all. If one was careless, one would incur losses. We would live on thick bhakri and dal. That we would also have to prepare ourselves. So they had to cook for themselves as well. We would also feed the masons and the artisans. There was a dire shortage of grain, materials, and water. We would have to pull water up from a bucket in a well that was 100 to 200 feet deep, just so that we could bathe and wash ourselves. From a depth of 200 feet, when the bucket came to the surface, there would hardly be any water. There was a sadhu with me at that time, and he would say, why are you pulling up the bucket like this? Let us make a bigger bucket. When he made one and used it, he got tired pulling it up 10 times, and so he abandoned the idea. In such difficult times, we have carved these stones. Shastriji Maharaj's eyes were very miraculous. He would not be afraid of anyone. I once asked him, Swami, you have so much work, so many issues to take care of. Issues with mandirs, the responsibility of the sadhus, no one to support you, yet you're able to fall asleep instantly. How is that possible? And Shastriji Maharaj replied, you too will understand this when all these issues come onto your head. At that time, you will also experience such peace. Very nice to hear how Shastriji Maharaj is comforting Pramukh Swami Maharaj and giving him the strength that you will also experience the same peace, but wait for the responsibilities to come ahead. Let's move on to C50. The year is 1951. Shastriji Maharaj was resting in Atladra and Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Gadda. But Shastriji Maharaj was very keen to move to Sarangpur. Today, coincidentally, is the same date when Pramukh Swami Maharaj before he left for Sarangpur for his last day, this is the 5th of May. This was the day when Pramukh Swami Maharaj constantly wanted to go to Sarangpur. Similarly, and then he left for Sarangpur, today was that date. Similarly, many years ago, Shastriji Maharaj also wanted to go to Sarangpur for his final days. And so Shastriji Maharaj was longing to go to Sarangpur. Eventually, Shastriji Maharaj was taken to Sarangpur by a train in a special saloon carriage. Motibhai of Chansad was the one that made all the attendants and was one of the main attendants at that time. And he accompanied Pramukh Swami Maharaj at that time. And he arranged Shastriji Maharaj's daily routine while he was in Sarangpur. So now Shastriji Maharaj is in Sarangpur. And one morning, Pramukh Swami Maharaj is also in Sarangpur. One morning, Shastriji Maharaj, after taking a shower, after taking a bath, he wanted to go up for darshan. So they all took Shastriji Maharaj up to the mandir in a chair for Thakurji's darshan. And they kept the chair under the dome. Shastriji Maharaj walked to the Kodi Mandap with the support of 2 attendants. While I'm reading this, it would be nice to just visualize, because many of us have seen Pramukh Swami Maharaj in a very similar site. They kept the chair under the dome. Shastriji Maharaj walked to the Kodi Mandap with the support of the 2 attendants. So seeing this, Swamiji then said to Shastriji Maharaj, Swami, why do you go through such trouble? And Shastriji Maharaj then smiled and replied, if we walk to go for darshan, then Maharaj will be more pleased. Bhagwan vadare raji thase. This incident is very interesting because we have seen Pramukh Swami Maharaj do the same thing. Many a time Pramukh Swami Maharaj would be brought up in a wheelchair to Thakurji, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj would insist that I want to get up and do darshan. And when we put the 2 parallels together, it shows where again this was coming from. Many of us have seen the videos of Pramukh Swami Maharaj walking in Smriti Mandir and in Sarangpur when he was having difficulty with walking. So again, this prasang goes back to that era again. Let's move on to C51. So while Shastriji Maharaj was in Sarangpur, he had a strong desire to go to Gadpur because that's where the Pratishta was going to take place. But because of his frail health, it was difficult to do that. Yet everybody did want him to go to Gadra if possible. Eventually, Pramukh Swami Maharaj managed to find a way so that Shastriji Maharaj's wish could be fulfilled. It was decided to take Shastriji Maharaj to Gadra in a car that was owned by the Darbar of Dared. Shastriji Maharaj was very happy with these arrangements that were made by Pramukh Swami Maharaj, and he expressed his joy and intense pleasure on Pramukh Swami Maharaj. On the morning of Wednesday, 11th April 1951, Shastriji Maharaj was ready. He got his pag tied on and was ready to leave for Gadra. Darbar Maipatsi, he arrived in his car, and Shastriji Maharaj sat in the back seat of the car, and that's how they got to Gadra. With Shastriji Maharaj's arrival in Gadra, everybody was elated and very excited because all the work that they had put in together was ultimately culminating to Shastriji Maharaj's Rajipo. And the fact that Shastriji Maharaj had come was a reward for all the efforts that they had done. So they were very elated, very excited. Shastriji Maharaj was also very pleased to see the progress of the construction work under the guidance of Pramukh Swami Maharaj, and he expressed his satisfaction. Then Pramukh Swami Maharaj also arranged a chair to take Shastriji Maharaj upstairs to the mandir. Sitting on the chair, Shastriji Maharaj then reached the mandir shrine area. Again, he expressed his happiness just seeing all this. A lot of careful inspection, which was very typical of Shastriji Maharaj. Then, before going downstairs to his room, next to his room, Swami Shri had kept the murtis ready. So then Shastriji Maharaj proceeded there. He saw the murtis that were ready to be installed and again expressed his happiness just seeing the murtis. He then asked for some water to be brought from the Gela river and then bathed each of the murtis in turn. We can see the joy. This was a dream because Shastriji Maharaj had tried so hard for almost 30 years for the Pratishta of this mandir. And now Pramukh Swami Maharaj had made that dream come true. And so you can imagine the happiness that Shastriji Maharaj was experiencing at that time. And he bathed the murtis very lovingly with the water from the river Gela. And then he placed the sacred thread, the janoi. He did a chanlo on the murtis before placing his hands on them. And then he garlanded the murtis. It was like a whole pratishta that was almost to be done. And then he performed the artis himself. Shastriji Maharaj did the arti of the murtis himself. And this way, the entire pratishta rituals had been completed. And then Shastriji Maharaj said that the pratishta is complete. My rituals are now complete. Jogi Maharaj will come and perform the arti. Maro vidhi puro. Have Jogi Maharaj avine arti karshe. And after this, then Shastriji Maharaj returned back to Sarangpur. So this was again another wish that Shastriji Maharaj had, and that was completed. Let's move on to C52. The Pratishta, Shastriji Maharaj finished the vidhi and then he came back to Sarangpur. One afternoon in Sarangpur, Shastriji Maharaj was seated under the limbado in the courtyard of the mandir, and Yogiji Maharaj and Swami Shri Pramukh Swami Maharaj were also there with many other sadhus at that time. And then Shastriji Maharaj said, Narayan Swami, in the meeting in Ahmedabad, I wrapped a chadar around you and appointed you in my place. However, do understand that the most senior in this satsang is Yogi Maharaj, and all should act according to his agna. Never ever allow any incident to happen which will sadden him. This sadhu has never acted against my will. He has always behaved according to my liking. All of you should understand him to be in my place and serve him with mind, deed and word. That will please me. Shastriji Maharaj spoke a lot of mahima about Yogiji Maharaj at that time, and we can see that Pramukh Swami Maharaj held these words throughout his entire life. Pramukh Swami Maharaj had said, કે મારો અને યોગી મહારાજના વિચાર ક્યારેય જુદા પડ્યા જ નથી. Always aligned his thoughts and actions with Yogiji Maharaj. Again, we can see that this was one agna that Shastriji Maharaj had given him, and he held that all the way throughout his entire life. After this, Yogiji Maharaj then departed from Mumbai. Pramukh Swami Maharaj went to Gadada, and Shastriji Maharaj remained in Sarangpur. Now, as soon as Pramukh Swami Maharaj went to Gadada, Shastriji Maharaj's health took a turn for the worse. His breathing rate started to increase. He stopped eating, he stopped drinking, he wouldn't talk that much. And seeing this, all the Hari Bhaktas were very upset. They were very saddened. And the attendants who were in Seva were very, very concerned that something will happen. And Shastriji Maharaj continuously, Swami Narayan, Swami Narayan, Swami Narayan, he kept on chanting the mantra. Again, his breathing was very difficult for him to breathe. And in this situation, one day Shastriji Maharaj suddenly woke up and he asked, has the Murti Pratishta in Gadada already been performed? And Moti Bhai, who was with him, said, yes, Swami, the Pratishta is complete. Hearing this, Shastriji Maharaj smiled. And he was very, very happy. And because this was Sriji Maharaj's wish, this was Bhagwan Swaminarayan's wish to have a mandir on the banks of the river Gela. And then Shastriji Maharaj closed his eyes again and became very quiet. On the night of May 9th, 1951, Pramukh Swami Maharaj came back to Sarangpur from Gadada. It was around 11 p.m. He was accompanied by Hari Jivan Swami, Tribhavan Das, Rasik Bhai, Mani Bhai, Narayan Bhai. Mani Bhai was Pujya Mohan Sai Maharaj's father. And they informed Shastriji Maharaj that the invitation cards for the Pratishta have already been printed. Shastriji Maharaj was very happy to hear all this news. But then everybody was still a little concerned about his health. And then Shastriji Maharaj, reassuring everybody, he said, nothing is going to happen to me. And with these words, he asked Pramukh Swami Maharaj to go back to Gadada. Pramukh Swami Maharaj had no choice. He was in a dilemma now. On the one side, you have all the construction work in Gadada to be completed just before the Pratishta, which is only a few days away. On the other side, he can see Shastriji Maharaj's failing health. Nevertheless, it was a difficult decision because throughout his life he had always obeyed Shastriji Maharaj's Agna. And so Pramukh Swami Maharaj carried on to go to Gadara around midnight, 2 a.m. Swami Shri left for Gadara. But before he left, Mani Bhai, Mohan Sai Maharaj's father, said to Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Shastriji Maharaj's breathing is somewhat different. Please send a good doctor from there tomorrow. Again, it was very difficult for Pramukh Swami Maharaj to leave, but nevertheless, he had to leave. And so Swami Shri then left for Gadara that next day, left for Gadara. Let's move on to C54. The very next day, as Pramukh Swami Maharaj had gone to Gadara, Shastriji Maharaj, who was in Sarangpur, opened his eyes at around 9 a.m. It was the morning of the 10th of May, 1951. Shastriji Maharaj said, take me to the Rang Mandap to Maharaj. Shastriji Maharaj was brought to the Rang Mandap, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj had already arranged for Dr. Bhalchandra to go to Sarangpur while he was still engaged in the work and the festivities. However, at 10:57, on the Vaishak Sud 4th, somewhat 207, Shastriji Maharaj passed away. Everybody in Sarangpur was stunned. The news spread and everybody was shocked. Pramukh Swami Maharaj was also very shocked hearing the news. And he immediately left for Sarangpur. During the journey, they just barely missed an accident. They were very fortunate because the lorry was going so fast, they almost collided with the train. And Swami said that it was just due to Ram Singh Bhai, who was driving, and his competence that he saved the day. Eventually, when they got to Ningada, from the railway station there, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, got out and they made a phone call to Yogi Bapa. Yogi Bapa was in Mumbai, so they made the phone call and they conveyed the news to Shastriji Maharaj, explaining what had actually happened. And then Pramukh Swami Maharaj eventually made it to Sarangpur around 12 noon. As soon as he saw Shastriji Maharaj, he broke down. And he remembered all the great moments and experiences that he had with Shastriji Maharaj. So this was the incident that happened. You could imagine that Shastriji Maharaj was the one that had trained him and nourished him throughout his life. Eventually, they had to do the funeral rites. So that was the final day. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj he met Yogiji Maharaj. He joined Yogiji Maharaj in the preparations for the final rites. There was a palki that had been prepared by Shastriji Maharaj himself. And so Pramukh Swami Maharaj himself lifted that palki on his shoulders and did 5 pradakshinas of the mandir. And eventually, they did the final funeral rites that were done over there. So this was C54. We'll move on to C55. Again, the final rites had been performed in this. And this was the moment when Shastriji Maharaj, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was remembered all the good moments that he had with Shastriji Maharaj, how Shastriji Maharaj had trained him. In fact, from the first time that he was initiated till today was 11.5 to 12.5 years. And this was the time that Pramukh Swami Maharaj had spent with Shastriji Maharaj, all the training that he had received, to the point from Diksha to leadership. But Pramukh Swami Maharaj knew that now it was his decision. Now, according to Shastriji Maharaj's Agna, the Shastriji Maharaj gaya જ નથી, એ તો Yogiji Maharaj માં જ રહ્યા છે. And eventually, he started to serve under the leadership of Yogiji Maharaj. So we will conclude today's session with C55, with Shastriji Maharaj passing away. Sri Swaminarayan Bhagwan Ni Jai.